Alright, look. You all didn't come here not knowing what a Genshin Impact is. The second real big cash cow of Hoya vs. Design, the first one being Honkai Impact 3rd, has come under fire pretty recently since they've neglected adding quality of life updates that are part and parcel of Honkai Star Rail, and have reacted to criticisms of their business practices just so maturely. But would you believe me if I said that's not why I'm here? No, the problems I've got with Genshin, from the looks of things, seem to be much more deeply embedded in the game's foundation. Namely, the pieces it uses to tell a story. So I'm gonna talk about what has personally turned me off about this game, and why I'm probably never coming back. But before I launch into my 5-hour diatribe, let me just say that if you still enjoy this game and want it to be better by adding new endgame pursuits and other gameplay elements, I'm honestly happy for you. It'd be disingenuous of me to act like Genshin gave me nothing of substance when that's just objectively untrue. We will get into that, trust me. I encourage you to share how you feel about my stance and the game in general in the comments. I don't want to be the be-all end-all of opinions here, I want to stimulate discussion. With all that said, let's get into it. Paimon.
Alright, I get it!
Now, this might come out of left field. Paimon is the mascot character, while Aether or Lumine is the protagonist character, right? At the beginning of the journey, the sibling you control expresses that what they want most is to reunite with their other half after being spirited away during a fight with an unknown god belonging to the world they're attempting to leave. Paimon emphatically announces that she will serve as a guide for her new friend through this world. Even though she has less brain cells than a pile of sentient goo, but we gotta have everything new exposited through the characters you meet, right? So of course she's not the protagonist, she's the helper. And yet, talking about the protagonist of this game is impossible without talking about Paimon. You see, despite the Traveler and Paimon being best friends, your Navi hardly lets you get a word in edgewise because she is too concerned with talking for the sake of talking, or whining for the sake of whining.
He still doesn't know what to talk about. Let's chat about something else then.
We don't have to chat! All Paimon does is drool over food, ask obvious questions that she should know the answer to considering she offered to be the tour guide, and restate information just fed to her by the other person speaking. I have legitimately skipped Paimon's dialogue entirely in unbroken sequences of plot and missed no context. Her presence is so unnecessary. And yet she is incredibly necessary. One cannot speak about the Traveler without mentioning their companion. After all, our protagonist is silent, are they not? Much like Link of Breath of the Wild, they are just a vessel for the player, and therefore need no—
What I really think is, every trial you've ever judged has left its impression on you. And that's what makes you who you are today.
How many years ago was it? I don't know.
I challenge you to a duel before the throne. Venti!
Well, could you help me put up some missing person posters?
Well, that can't be right. Why have a traveling companion character whose purpose is to hold conversations if your character is perfectly capable of holding conversations? Why let only one half of the duo speak up when it's clear through the scarce voiced dialogue we do get that the Traveler has their own thoughts and feelings about how things are shifting, their own personality that almost never shines through? Hi, Editor Blue here. I was just looking for footage of Genshin stuff on YouTube, and I found this compilation of Traveler and Paimon sketches where they just talk back and forth and exchange a couple jokes that aren't really funny, but like they do add character to the Traveler, and the same list exists for the female Traveler as well. This is the 1.1 list, meaning we had this practically at launch. And it gets updated with every new region that gets added to the game. So the list only gets longer. And all of this is just tucked away in a menu somewhere. And if you want any of this characterization, you got to go out of your way into the character profiles and listen to it all. And this is 37 minutes worth at the beginning of the game. 4 years ago. I just wanted to put that out there. Brace yourselves for the earth-shaking revelation. I think the devs of Genshin Impact wanted it both ways. They wanted a protagonist that could be a silent vessel for the player to seamlessly insert themselves into the world, and they wanted the protagonist to be the driving force for the narrative. Honestly, even if silent protagonists aren't as popular as they were back in the day of 2 buttons and a D-pad on a stick, customizability, decision-making, and even voice acting in games has come so far that even if the character you play doesn't say the lines you choose out loud, you still feel inherently connected to that character with how much they reflect you otherwise. Most game protagonists that work are ones that let you drive the narrative because their goals, more often than not, align with yours, whether they chirp about it or not. Detective Yagami wants to find the serial killer known as the Mole. The player wants to see how this mystery plays out. Joker wants to rebel against authority. The player wants to explore more dungeons and make friends with the city folk in pursuit of getting stronger to take out the bosses. Aloy wants to leave her old stomping grounds and chase after a group of cultists. So does the player. Even side objectives, while they can easily be skewed as a protagonist getting distracted for a laugh, can be solved without sacrificing the integrity of the character or the narrative, even if the motive is something as simple as wanting to get stronger or just wanting to help. All this to say that Luther here has a simple motive that is relatable. Find your family. However, the narrative chooses to ignore this and instead do whatever the hell it wants. Okay, so Venti gets his Gnosis, elemental MacGuffin meaning this be an Archon Lamel, stolen, and recommends you check Liyue for hints on your siblings' whereabouts. Hit up the harbor, watch a god die, and get no intel from the locals. Awesome! I know this place holds no info for me, so why am I helping order a funeral for a dead god that means nothing to Luther? It does all eventually become relevant. And then it's off to Inazuma, where this whole vision hunt decree is going on. The Archon of the nation is literally stealing people's powers, and with them, those people's will to live. Fantastic! The Archon is already directly involved in the conflict. Let's just get to work and not agree to help. Because this is apparently irrelevant to finding your twin, who is spirited away by a god who may just be connected to the god of this nation. You know, the Archon? What? Okay, so you'll leap, chomping at the bit, at the chance to set up this random-ass god funeral. He is fucking dead, no cap. But then when the plot already involves a living god that at this point may be the closest we have gotten to getting any more info about the unknown god, you think,
nah, I got better things to do.
Like fucking what? Blowing dandelion seeds from the top of this statue for the 5th time? This is directly involved with what you want! This wouldn't be a problem if Luther were directly driving the narrative. Why does Luther agree to help with a random funeral that, in character, they wouldn't give a hell about? Well, the narrative demands you explore Liyue some more. Get to know this totally not Rex Lapis guy over here, we swear. Get to know this guy that sells toys apparently and gets off on fighting. Who knows, maybe he'll be relevant later. Why does Luther refuse to help Ayaya and friends fight the Vision Hunt Decree and then just decide to change their mind later? Well, the narrative wants you to see how the Vision Hunt Decree is affecting the populace before you decide to war against it. It's not like you could fight against it and carry on like usual. That'd be silly. Now, I will give Genshin credit. It has gotten better about having there be an immediate drive to involve yourself in the nation's problems, like saving the Archon from gay baby jail, or figuring out why the hell this obvious Archon doesn't have Archon powers and why this beautiful dragon man is so strong he can't die. Even with this extra effort though, the protagonist is just as dissociated from every chat as before, and the lack of agency from before really comes back and bites Luther in the ass. All this comes down to the way Genshin is structured as an ongoing game. Our protag comes into a new nation, meets some of the new characters that'll have banners soon, learns about the country's problems, helps the folks solve those problems, asks where their sibling is, gets a single insufficient breadcrumb about where the hell they've gone, and then things go dark for literal months until Dainsleif busts in like the Kool-Aid man to shout about Conria and the gods and killing every last one of them. This pattern has gone on for more than 3 years now. 5 10 to 20 hour chapters stretched out over 36 months at minimum. If the game didn't remind you, I am dead certain no one would remember why Luther was even bothering. Essentially, the protagonist enters the nation with a clear motive and then leaves with a better idea of what that motive entails. But where does that leave them in the interim, while within the nation's borders? For the majority of a real-life year, the player character is bent to the will of what's affecting the nation, and in that span of time, any development the protagonist might be having is left foggy and undefined because of how far things are stretched. Even if you play all of the Archon quests in one sitting as they are now, blasting all the way from Mondstadt through Fontaine, the evolution of Luther's character is remarkably simplistic over the course of 50 to 100 hours, and even potentially easy to miss given how little they contribute to conversation, which, wouldn't you know, is the majority of this game. The protagonist grows disillusioned with this world's novelty and holds grudges against people for being dishonest. Cool, glad that's how I spent a week's worth of hours. The fact that the protagonist rarely contributes to the hours spent just standing around and talking makes it all the more aggravating when they do decide to voice their opinion. I remember getting incredibly heated when they refused to trust Linny after the first chapter of Fontaine. Perhaps you could call me gullible or easy to sway by emotions, but Linny's story about how he and Lynette joined the Fatui and how they trusted Arlecchino body, mind, and soul despite her insanely terrible vibes broke my heart. I wanted to offer all the sympathy I physically could in that moment. A Vessel character might have made me feel like I could at least get close, but Luther is not a Vessel character. And being reminded of that in a moment of vulnerability stung. I'm going to smack the fucking traveler upside the head. You do not just walk away from that. Hashtag cancel traveler. Hashtag cancel traveler party. Can we do that? I don't care how many thousands of years you've lived. There is no amount of things you can see that makes that okay. The protagonist might eventually have leaned toward being more trusting through Linny's character quest, but by that point, the damage had already been done. The way a protagonist is handled can easily make or break a story or a consumer's ability to enjoy it. That's honestly why I've never had motive to go back and try to get more than a few hours into Tale of the Abyss. It can be that much of a game changer. The fact that there is essentially no drive to the narrative with the protagonist constantly being passive in their own story makes it all the harder to be convinced to go back. But I've just been spewing hot air at this point. Blue Bow, you may say. No one joins Genshin for the main character. They join for the 5-star and 4-star characters that you can play as besides the protagonist. Right. Why don't we talk about them, shall we? I will be quite blunt. I adore these characters. I'll admit most of my favorites come from Fontaine. Who'd have thunk, the bitch that loves water loves folks in the Water Nation most. Ha! But the other nations aren't slacking on their fair share of hits either. Mondstadt is home to Noelle and Bennett, two adorable fighters for good that have their own holdbacks. The bubbly Clee, who is definitely not starting fires in your area. The revenge-obsessed Eula, whose existence is a compelling commentary on how much impact family can have on your identity. And fuck you, I like Barbara. She's just a better Risei. Fight me! Liyue has a pirate wife and a stock market wife that are subtly not subtly dating and have their own power structures and day-to-days are completely distinct from each other. A wizened old man who used to be a god, but now all he talks about is some kind of wine and it makes me really sad for some reason. The most adorable zombie girl I have ever seen, and we will get back to you. Inazuma has the ultimate male wife in Toma, the ultimate underdog Genki girl in Yoimiya, and the ultimate man please do unspeakable things to me Kitsune bad bitch in Yae Miko. Sumeru has the kind to the point of self-sacrifice Kade with autistic icon and no nonsense I'll hate them, alongside the endearingly curious and knowledgeable Nahida and the indomitable Dia who can outsmart you and outkick your ass. Almost without fail, most of these characters are tropey on the surface but contain much more underneath should you go looking. Don't even get me started on the Fontaine characters, I will literally ramble about Neuvillette all day. This is the big reason why I can't say my time with Genshin was all bad. When it comes to characters, Hoyoverse knows what they're doing. And yet, once again, there's a caveat here. And once again, it all comes down to how the game is structured. Ask yourself this. If a character has no banner coming up, and the current Archon quest does not focus on their region, what reason does Hoyoverse have to give that character any screen time? At the end of the day, Hoyoverse wants to make money from this game, and if a character won't pull in the cash, they won't focus on them. I brought up Baizhu for a reason earlier. He is a shining example of a 5-star that, despite being incredibly intriguing and having a compelling struggle, will likely never receive another story quest. Baizhu is a character I've held near and dear to my heart ever since I completed his story quest. All he seemed to me at first was a hot doctor with a bit of a suspicious interest in pushing humanity's limitations. The story at that point hadn't introduced Dendro as a playable element, so I, like the story, soon forgot about him. Come his story quest, where his contract with his pet snake, Chungsheng, is revealed to be a monkey's paw. His healing abilities and biology are enhanced beyond normal human limits. However, every time he pulls from that power Chungsheng gives him, his life grows ever shorter and his body grows ever more feeble. Chungsheng cannot survive without someone holding a contract with her. Baizhu pursues immortality not for the sake of being a godlike individual, but to allow Chungsheng to continue living free of the contract and to be able to heal people regardless of ailment or severity of such. All this is revealed in one character quest, and I've been fascinated by this character ever since. But given how poorly Baiju's banners have done, even on rerun, and given how visits to Liyue grow more populated by unfamiliar faces, I don't think we'll ever see an ending to this arc that has barely made it past the gate. Even if we do, by the time we do, who will care? Aside from the few niche enjoyers of Baizhu, most people will not know nor care to know what makes Baizhu tick. Okay, so it's one big popularity contest, you might think. The more popular characters will get more screen time and development, right? Well, yes, but actually no. Sometimes a character is so popular they don't even need to show up just to sell a banner. Raiden Shogun is obviously the biggest offender, but you could argue she has a narrative reason for staying cooped up in her closet. What about Alhaitham? If it's not the Archon quest and his do not separate partner isn't involved, he probably just stays at home dissociating and listening to lo-fi beats to study and relax to. His banner still sells because he's a cool character. How about Cyno? He's pretty limited to Sumeru as it is, but he will just leave to play card games. Of course he'll sell whether he shows up or not, because Anubis motifs worked for Lucario. They'll work for Cyno. Yai Miko? She's a mischievous fox woman. You think she won't sell on looks alone? So you need to hit that sweet spot of not being so popular you sell regardless of game screen time, but just popular enough that I guess that people don't actually hate you, because that's literally the only reason I can think of why they don't get Baizhu content. It sounds less like a popularity contest and more like survival of the middest. Funnily enough, Yoimiya and Ayaka both end up fitting nicely here, despite the latter being the big hype beta bitch that everybody wanted on launch, and the former being just a gal. I think she's better, don't at me. All I've been talking about are limited run banner characters though. Characters that you won't always have access to, so Hoyoverse has more incentive to give them exclusive content to get you to pull. But there's always been another banner, hasn't there? The standard banner. Who, buddy, do I have something to say about this? Consider this a death sentence for any character's development if they're so unfortunate to get pinned here. Characters on the standard banner are always available and might even jump scare you on the limited time banner if you get unlucky pulling for your newest baby girl. Why is it a problem that they're always available? Well, let's return to that question I asked at the beginning of this section. Most of the standard banner characters are 5-star folks you meet in Mondstadt, with a couple of Liyue and Sumeru folk tossed in for extra spice. If you're current on the Archon quest updates, then you've long since finished each of these regions, so these characters are hardly relevant nowadays. Once a character is on the standard banner, they will not have an exclusive banner like all the cool kids do. Players ultimately pull on the standard banner at their own whims, which might as well be never, since fear of missing out, or FOMO, is a frighteningly effective sales technique, and that'll nudge players into using well-earned wishes on the timed event, rather than the one that's always there and will probably jump scare them anyway. Consider any character on the 5-star banner dead in the water. They have the lowest possible likelihood of getting any screen time at all, because there's no motive to drive up sales if they don't encourage the FOMO phenomenon. Characters like Dia and Tainari have been less affected due to their recent addition to the banner, God help them. But where does that leave the patch 1.0 characters? The likes of Diluc, Jean, Kuching, Chi-Chi, fucking Chi-Chi! Y'all can stay mad about losing your 50-50 to cute zombie girl. She is never a loss in my book. took. These characters barely exist in this world. They're hardly mentioned and hardly noticed. The fanbase sure as hell notices them, but that's not necessarily a good thing. No character quests, hardly any timed event screen time, kits that pale in comparison to the more elusive, shiny new model. Why are they here if they're irrelevant? What's the point? If you're too popular, you don't get development. If you're not popular enough, you don't get development. God forbid if you're permanently available, you sure as fuck are not getting development. Characters should be the pride and joy of a writer. Little fellas that writers would want to return to and peer into the life of again. All these characters in this game are toys that quickly grow dull and boring when compared to the next ones in line. I don't want to play with you anymore is the terminally online mentality this game is perpetuating through its use of characters as tools to draw the eye of the player just long enough that it'll be too late for them to do anything once they notice their wallet is gone. And I hate that. I won't lie to you, I may have grown needlessly attached to some of these characters. But as much as I love them, I can't will an ending to their arcs into being. Even though Neuvillette and Furina's character quests are more of a beginning to arcs than brief peeks into their lives, if they drop off in popularity come Natlan, who can say we'll ever see the end of them? The likes of Jean, Diluc, and Chi-Chi haven't seen an end or even a beginning to an arc in their story quests, and who knows if we'll ever get one. Only Hoyoverse knows, and until they show their hand, these characters' stories, nay, the game's story, remain incomplete. Genshin isn't a game I despise. It's a game I wish could be better. It's given me some of my all-time favorite characters. Period, with no contest in sight. I would unironically count Neuvillette, Furina, Wriothesley, and Baizhu on a favorite characters list, and the story centered on a more in-depth look at how the characters feel, how the world affects them, have brought me to the brink of tears. But those are unfortunately few and far between. Woefully scarce in a game that prides itself on having a wide variety of likable characters. Most of what I want from these characters that I've ranted about in this video is easily found through fan works. Whether it's art of the characters enjoying the day together, animations of romance blossoming between two likely or even unlikely candidates, or writing that further explores character dynamics and interactions. The characters of this game have touched the hearts of so many players, to the point that you could literally drown in the content made about them. And it's all free, or at the very least cheaper than a battle pass. Some art don't come free, friends. Please pay your artists. Like I said at the beginning, I think this is a problem too deeply rooted in the game to really be unearthed. Sure, they could easily add QOL changes and endgame changes that will finally appease the masses, but I don't see my complaints being looked at and integrated to make the game's story and characters better. I've had fun with this game, and even if I've spent more money than I'm proud of on it, I'm really happy it's inspired creativity in so many other people. It definitely has for me.